In touch, in tune, and independent. For the latest, log on to ewn.co.za or ewn.mobi.
Aubrey Masango on 92.7 and 106 FM.
Streaming on 702.co.za, the 702 app, and DSTV channel 856.
It's 6 minutes after 9 o'clock. And welcome to the second hour of the show. Let me thank Dr. Frank Magwegwe in the first hour for a very important conversation around funeral policies as a means of creating wealth. I am looking for a time when we are going to have the conversation around the mindset about funerals in many of our communities. The high premium we place on the funeral, the lavishness of the funeral, the ostentatious character of a funeral. I do want us to have that conversation and what it means to our pockets, and what are those meanings that we attach and how important are they really in the greater scheme of things? What do you think of cremation? So I'm looking forward to that conversation. Perhaps we might even touch on it in the final hour of the show when we do that Nkosi hour. Really looking forward to this. In this hour, we're going to be talking about a very interesting phenomenon with Dr. Mark Benecke. He's a forensic biologist who has researched this topic for many, many years, right? Now listen to this. On December 5, 1966, the body of 92-year-old Dr. J. Irvin Bentley was discovered in his Pennsylvania home by a meter reader. Actually, only part of Dr. Bentley's leg and a foot were found. The rest of his body had been burned to ashes in his bathroom. Part of the good doctor's incineration lay at the site, or incineration robe. Incinerated robe lay at the side, and his walker was left propped up against the blanket bathtub. But the most eye-catching clue was a massive hole in his vinyl floor, measuring 2 feet, right? Wide for 4 by 4 feet. It had eaten into the wooden floor beams and left a pile of ashes in the basement below. The rest of the house remained intact. How could a man catch fire and then burn so completely without igniting everything around him? At first, Bentley's demise was identified as a careless mishap. The elderly gentleman loved to smoke his pipe, and he had a habit of carrying matches in his robe pockets. Upon reviewing the scene, the coroner deducted that Bentley had fallen asleep while smoking in the bathroom and was burned alive after some of his clothing caught fire. But there's another school of thought. Bentley's case, and many others like it, have been presented as examples of spontaneous human combustion, SHC. Although he and other alleged victims of the phenomenon burned almost completely, their surroundings were left somewhat unscathed. So, can humans spontaneously burn into flames? A lot of people think spontaneous human combustion is a real occurrence, but most scientists aren't convinced. In this conversation, we're going to be talking to Dr. Benecke to try and ascertain whether or not there is truth to the idea of spontaneous human combustion. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation as we speak to the good doctor, Dr. Mark Benecke, who is a forensic biologist who has researched this topic extensively. Please join us on 011-883-0702 in the weird and the wonderful as we talk about spontaneous human combustion. By the way, remember, your calls are invited and welcome throughout this conversation, and you can call us on 011-883-0702 straight after this.
Clement Maniatella,
Weekday mornings,
9 to 12.
9 to 12.
So legally speaking, yes, by definition, he's not done anything wrong. But ethically speaking, is it fair to say he could have made a much better decision?
I would not at this stage preempt the investigation and say ethically he was wrong. What I put in the public domain is that it's an ethical dilemma.
Okay.
But also, Clement, the fact that you walk back your decision does not mean you were ethically wrong.
Advocate Tulima Donsele.
Clements Manyatela.
9 to 12 on 702.
Looking to get IT certifications? Sign up with Talk IT, an accredited training company, and get access to the latest international technology accredited training portfolio for all your IT certification needs. Visit talk-it.com today. Talk IT, a leading ICT technical training provider in Africa for over 25 years.
My fellow South Africans, what can you buy with 28 Rand a day? Half a quarter? Half a boerewors roll? No, seriously, you can get half of nothing with 28 Rand. But with MyWay, you can get full cover from 28 Rand per day, and that includes 24/7 roadside assistance, emergency alert, and so much more. Yes, from as little as 28 Rand per day, you can let your drive continue. For a quote, call MyWay now on 0860 64 64 64 and save. MyWay is a licensed non-life insurer and FSP. Premiums are risk profile dependent and T's and C's apply.
702.
Weird and wonderful.
Dr. Mark Benecke is my guest, and we are going to be talking about the phenomenon known as spontaneous human combustion. Is it real? Is it a figment of some people's imagination? What does science have to say about this phenomenon? And Dr. Mark Benecke joins me now on Zoom. Dr. Benecke, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your time.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
So is this real? This idea, this phenomenon, this thing called spontaneous human combustion. What is it? We've heard of many stories. I've just accounted a story just now of a Dr. J. Irving Bentley in 1966 in Pennsylvania, United States. Some believe it was spontaneous human combustion. Some don't. What is it?
Well, I have to say and confess that the crime scenes or the scenes of incineration look really weird and strange, because in many cases the legs and the arms remain, whereas everything else is just burnt down to ashes, it seems, or at least it is blackened very severely. So especially on black and white photographs, you don't see it very well anymore. So it seems as if the people who have a lighter skin on their arms and on their legs, as if they were the only parts of the body that would remain. But when you look a little bit closer at the photographs, in many cases you see that parts of the remaining body are still there, but they were just burnt down quite heavily and were charred and blackened. So like I said, you don't see them that properly anymore. But we have also other cases in which parts of the body were already removed by the emergency team, and the legs, for example, would just still stand at the seat where the person that is now dead and deceased would have been sitting before. So but still, like you said in the beginning, it's strange that the rest of the apartment or the flat or the building is not going to catch fire, even though it can eat into the floor. I mean, that is a strange thing. And that was what I thought when I started to talk to the one single person who survived spontaneous human combustion in Belgium. And I was really like, okay, I mean, which type of fire was it? Where did it start? And so on. And so after looking literally at hundreds of cases, we found that there's always something that burns, like you mentioned, the pipe or the matches. It could be a cigarette or something like that. That falls onto something that can burn, for example, your clothing whilst you are sitting. But still, that wouldn't explain why the fire would not reach into the whole apartment. And the reason is that under your skin, you have a layer of fat. And that layer of fat will very easily liquefy. And as long as you are clothed, so you're wearing like a shirt, trousers, or something like that, the wax-like fat will soak into the clothing, and then the flame will be very small. It's a very small blue flame. We did some experiments on that, so we know that it really happens. We saw it. And that little flame will just stick to the very part of the body where you do have the wick, let's call it a wick, where the fat is soaking into the clothing, and that is going to burn quite slowly and char and blacken everything at that part of the body, but it will not ignite the rest of the building. In many cases, when the rest of the building is ignited, nobody will say this is spontaneous human combustion. In those cases, people would say, well, that's just a building fire. But in the very rare cases, worldwide, seen on a worldwide scale, where you do have this little wick like structure that is just consuming parts of the body and burning upwards. So this is why the legs are often not consumed. In those cases, it looks very, very strange, even to professional fire workers who have seen a lot of burnt people. They would always say, I've seen hundreds of burnt people, but I've never seen the legs remaining. And the reason is that it just very rarely happens that way. We know it. Yeah, we know that the fat-like substance is the reason for all of this, because in German concentration camps during World War II, the problem was also that they could not really burn down the corpses to the full extent, and so they had to put in dead people who had a higher fat content into their body to quickly burn the corpses. So we have a lot of sources and information about that topic.
Let me perhaps take a step or two back and try to understand what is the theory around spontaneous human combustion. So, in other words, what do those who believe in spontaneous human combustion contend? What is their theory? How do they explain the burning of a body of such as that of Dr. J. Irving Bentley? What is their theory?
Well, if you look over let's say the past 300 years or 250 years, where we do have good medical literature and good descriptions of the scenes of the burning, the explanations that people give are always explanations that fit into the time. So the first cases in which people burned with alleged spontaneous human combustion were cases in which people were considered to have drunken too much alcohol, because alcohol in high percentages may burn or can burn, but that was already a very strange theory, because you can never drink that much alcohol that your complete body may incinerate. So that was
like serious babalas right there.
Yeah, you would have to drink a lot of moonshine and to be serious, you can't reach that amount of alcohol, because you will be dead long before you can reach an amount of alcohol inside of your body, before you reach a point where the alcohol can burn inside of your body. So that was the first explanation. Later on, let's switch to the 1970s or 1960s. It became esoteric. So people would say these are strange rays coming out of the earth or coming from anywhere, out of the atmosphere, and then just randomly and accidentally they hit the person. And then the latest theory, if we come to very modern times now, is that, for example, if you try to lose body weight, and that is true, then your mouth starts to smell. Maybe some of the people who listen to your show may have experienced that. So you get bad breath. And the reason is that when the fat in your body starts to melt, so to speak, because you are dieting and not eating much anymore, then acetone comes out of your mouth. And this is part of the bad breath smell. And acetone also is very, very easily, can burn very easily. But again, the concentration is so low that you can smell it and you get bad breath, but it's impossible to set it on fire. So there were many, many, many explanations. I just gave you 3 of them over the past 300 years, but none of them was really from let's say a forensic or a natural scientist's point of view. They just didn't work in experiments, but people didn't care. They wanted to believe into the supernatural and the weird and wonderful and strange. And so, there was nothing to do against that.
And that's why we're having this conversation on the weird and wonderful here on 702. Please give me a call, 011-883-0702. Have you heard of this phenomenon called spontaneous human combustion? In other words, Aubrey's sitting on the chair and suddenly he just burns up. Maybe he had a little bit of halitosis just before. And maybe he had a moment of the bad breath smells. Yeah.
Or
Give us a
even
call. I'd love to hear from you.
combined with a drink, probably with an
Or maybe
alcoholic
he had a
beverage.
couple
Yeah.
of schnapses the night before. Give me a call. Have you heard of this phenomenon? And what are your thoughts about it? Do you believe that it is a possibility? And what explanations do you have for something of that nature? Give us a call on 011-883-0702 as I speak to forensic biologist, Dr. Mark Benecke, trying to explain to us exactly what this is all about. Is there a possibility, Dr. Mark Benecke, as remote as it might be, that, I have had some terrible acid reflux in my past. And really that I thought I was going to spontaneously combust right there where I was sitting. Is it possible that our bodies are able to produce chemicals in combinations in ways that can seriously harm us? I'm not yet at the point where we can spontaneously combust, but I'm almost aware that it is possible that our bodies are able to produce chemicals in some of the most lethal combinations, right?
Yeah, it's very.
Is it then possible to then believe or postulate from that idea that perhaps we could see combustion because of something like that?
Yeah, it's very, very good that you mentioned that. I mean, the acid reflux is a different story because inside of your stomach, it's very acidic anyways. So, that's something that your body can obviously deal with, even though it feels very unpleasant if you get the reflux. But there are two other chemicals that our body produces all the time or deals with all the time. That's oxygen and hydrogen. The oxygen, of course, is something that we breathe in all the time from the air. But the hydrogen is something that our body runs with. So we use hydrogen all the time in the energy cycle, the biological energy cycle of our body. It's a very important chemical currency, so to speak. And if you combine oxygen with hydrogen, you get an explosive gas. And that was also one of the theories why spontaneous human combustion might occur, because once you combine these two gases, let's say in a balloon at the university, or when you teach something, it's a nice experiment for students, then this will quite impressively explode, whereas oxygen alone or hydrogen alone will not cause such a explosive effect immediately. So indeed, that was one of the main theories that led to the idea that spontaneous human combustion could be something that is caused or produced out of chemicals that our body produces. But again, the problem is this only works as long as you have oxygen and hydrogen in the form of gases. And you can never have, let's say for some reason you would have a lot of hydrogen inside of your body in the form of a gas, but oxygen for sure, that's something that nobody ever had, because as you know, the oxygen is brought into our lungs, and then it will stick to our blood cells in chemical form, and it becomes kind of liquefied or part of your body and not a gas anymore. So there is no biological or medical explanation how you could bring those two gases as gases together. And even if that would be possible, then what would cause the ignition? Because nobody, though it may feel like that, but you don't have fire to ignite those gases. So from any point of view, biologically speaking, you just could not get the explosion started. So it's theoretically, like you were saying, remotely, technically, there might be a possibility if your body runs out of order, but practically, if you do experiments and look into the biological and medical history of mankind, there is no way.
Give me a call, 011-883-0702. Your thoughts about spontaneous human combustion. My guest is a forensic biologist, Dr. Mark Benecke, and he is perhaps giving us the natural, hardcore scientific thought around this phenomenon. I am receiving a couple of messages already. Aisha Ranshot on Twitter says a family member came back from the cemetery very traumatized. He had seen flames coming out from a grave next to where he was sitting praying. Is it possible, Dr. Benecke, that the way by which we understand, or the way by which we measure certain phenomenon as far as the measurements of science in contemporary science are concerned, are limited, and that we don't know certain things well enough and don't have the right, measuring units to be able to come to a conclusive conclusion about something such as spontaneous human combustion? Could that be a possibility, that science itself doesn't know enough to be able to explain this conclusively enough?
Yeah, these are two questions. The one question is, does science know everything, or do we possibly or probably not have the right measuring units? That is always the case. Science is an ongoing story. It would be very boring for us if we knew everything, and all our curiosity, of course, is sparked, pun intended, by that we don't know some things. But so it's a good thing that we find things to research on. But concerning the flames that came out of the grave, that is absolutely possible depending on the type of the grave, because once you decompose, that's a different story. So you're long dead, you're decomposing now. There is a build-up of gases that are flammable. And I don't know about South Africa, but let's say somebody puts a candle there, or a candle falls to the side. I don't know if that is a habit that you have in graveyards in South Africa, but if there is a flame, that could actually ignite the decompositional gases. That is perfectly possible, yes.
Take a call from Mariah in Rivonia. Hi, Mariah.
Hi, Aubrey. Love the show, as always. Aubrey,
Thank you.
I apologize in advance if it's like a very silly question.
If you could please just move around for us, Mariah, because we're losing a lot of what you're saying.
So, but Dr. May, if you want to step, a possible scenario is where, you obviously...
All right, Mariah, I've got to stop you because we're not hearing a word of what you're saying. So I'm going to try and get you back to Ntateng so that you can put you on a different line so that we can hear exactly what question you are asking there, Mariah in Rivonia. So, I mean, I hear the epistemic humility from you there, Dr. Benecke, when you say that, science might not necessarily know everything and so forth. So I ask the question directly around spontaneous human combustion. Is it possible that spontaneous human combustion is a real thing, and we just don't know enough as science to be able to outright say that there is no such thing?
I mean, I'm probably the one who researched the highest number of cases with a very open mind. I even joined with an esoteric researcher who wrote a huge book where he collected lots of cases from former times, from the United States mostly, and English-speaking countries. I also put together some stuff from the Netherlands and from Germany and so on and so on. So we really joined forces, and everybody thought we would be fighting, but we did not, because he was a clear-cut esoteric person. He thought, I don't think that your scientific explanations are enough. And I was like, okay, I don't know. I'm always testing, so I make no assumptions. And after all the cases in which I looked, looking at medical records, especially photographs since the 1950s, but also very good descriptions from old medical records, there were two things were always there. The one was the person was in clothes, and there was never a nude case. So, that is already a sign that there must be something going on, probably the wick. And the second thing is there was always a source of ignition in all cases. So even women in former times did smoke. Some people don't know that, but because they think only male people were smoking a long time ago, but even females did it. And since we do have both, and we know from experiments that I personally did, and also a colleague of mine did them with human corpses, I did it with animal corpses. We know that the fat can liquefy. We also know it from the concentration camp reports that I already mentioned.
Yes.
So we have a lot of cases. We have always the same observations, and we have experiments. So if I would be in the courtroom as a scientific expert, which is my job, I would say, this is safe and sound. This is good enough for a trial. So we know what happened, and we do not need an esoteric explanation. However, if you love esoteric explanations, I may not be able to disprove it in a case in which I have no photographs, no descriptions, no nothing. So in those cases, I would give it to you and I would say, you know what? I don't have the evidence in your case. There are no stains. I have nothing that I can put under my microscope or under my lens, symbolically speaking. So you go along with your esoteric explanation. I'm okay with that.
Mariah, back in Rivonia. Hi, Mariah.
Sorry. Hi, Aubrey. Nice to join in again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Aubrey, well, what I was asking, and forgive me if it's a silly question, which I'm sure it is, but back to the point that the doctor was making a few minutes ago about the combination of oxygen and hydrogen.
Yeah.
And that, obviously we breathe in oxygen, but also if we breathe out or we produce hydrogen, I'm not quite sure. But that can be a possible scenario for, incineration or something. So it occurred to me in a closed environment like the gym, where people are inhaling oxygen, obviously, but also because, heavy exercise and so forth, the hydrogen involved. If there was something like, whatever, some fire or light started, is that could the gym go up in flames? Just asking.
Could the gym go up in flames because of all of the exercise, the breathing in of oxygen, the presence of hydrogen in one way or the other? Could the gym, in theory, go up in flames, Dr. Benecke?
The good news is that the hydrogen is very, very tightly bound to the parts, the molecules, so the little parts in your body. So the hydrogen will never form a gas. So that stays inside of your body, chemically bound, and will never get out. And the second good news is that since during sports and physical exercise, you breathe in a lot of oxygen, and then that oxygen is taken out of the room. So the inside of the room, there's no buildup of hydrogen and oxygen mixture. So the more sports you do, the more you protect your gym from getting incinerated because you're consuming all the oxygen, so to speak. No, but really, the main point is that the hydrogen is severely, tightly bound to the insides of your body, not in the form of a gas. So nothing can happen in the gym, no matter how hard you exercise.
Tommy in Centurion, good evening to you.
Brilliant guest, good evening.
Good evening to you, Tommy. Go ahead. What's your question for Dr. Benecke?
Doctor, in Texas, there has been an explosion, I think about 2 weeks ago, of a dairy farm, and 18,000 cattle were killed. I'm not too sure if you are aware of that.
Yes,
No,
yes.
I'm not aware of that.
Yes, but I am. Yes, I know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Where I'm getting to is that I'm not too sure of the chances that the average human being who is not a vegetarian would not have a methane buildup in their system. Now, my question is that for people who are on a vegetarian diet or a vegan diet,
Yeah.
is there a possibility that they have a higher rate of methane buildup in their systems, or is the chemical breakdown in human beings different from cows?
Very, very important question, Tommy. Dr. Benecke?
Now we are talking about methane, so that's a different gas, and it's actually a very interesting question because it can be tested, and I like things that can be tested. So what we did was we since I am vegan and my wife is too, but we also know other people who eat different types of food. So we distributed little kits, not little children, but kids with a T. So that means it's something packed into a box, including a swab, probably the swabs that you know from during Corona, when you would do a swab in your nose to check if you got Corona, and those swabs you can also use to take a little sample of feces and check which bacteria inside of your feces and also which gases they produce. And we sent that in over a certain time interval, and we found, and many others found that too. So this is a huge experiment with tens and thousands of people, that the bacteria inside of your body adapt to what you eat. So my bacteria, for example, are consuming a lot of carbohydrates because I like sweet stuff like cakes and so on. And my wife, in contrast, she does not eat sweet stuff. Vegan, she's also vegan. She's more eating like peas and vegetables and so on, more healthy things probably. And she has completely different bacteria compared to mine. But the people in the laboratory who do not know us, they knew what we eat from our bacteria. And because every bacterium is specialized in using or utilizing what you eat. Even if you're eating meat, no matter what you eat, the bacteria change and they adapt inside of your body or inside of your intestines. And that means that the buildup of gases is not related, or you don't have more gases building up as a vegan who is, let's say, just eating plant products, because your bacteria adapt so that you do not get bloated too much. Of course, if you eat food that your bacteria are not adapted to, then you would get bloated a lot. But that, like you're saying, that is just methane. So not our explosive gas that we were talking about, but that is a gas that can burn. Please don't try this at home, because it really burns. So because sometimes young people would use a match or a lighter and put that on, their bodily winds that come out of their body. So please don't do that, because it may be dangerous. It's not like making you explode, but it's still unpleasant because all the hair burns on that part of your body. So you are right. If there would be lots of methane and there would be a source of ignition, then that would burn, but it would not explode, and it would also not set your body on fire because it's not enough gas. That you can try out if you have just a little bit of methane and you are wearing a jeans or something that is really tightly woven and not from polyester, but let's say it's cotton jeans, then you will see that this is not going to ignite with such a low amount of methane that your body can release during an event that feels probably even relieving to you. So, but you are right. Methane may burn, but it will not cause your body to ignite.
But perhaps let's extend that question a little bit further, the question that Tommy is asking, and combine it with Mariah's question. Let's say we've got a whole bunch of people who are perhaps vegan, who can produce serious amounts of methane in the gym. Would they, like the 18,000 cows, be able to spontaneously combust?
So the methane can be produced by anybody. So for example, you eat exclusively meat. Let's say somebody would like that. In those cases, they could also produce a lot of methane by, for example, all of a sudden switching to peas, and so because the bacteria are not adapted. So it doesn't matter if you're which type of food you use. Everybody can produce methane, and if you're in a room and many people release that methane, then the critical concentration of methane is probably not going up to a level so that everything's starting, like the gym starting to explode, because before that happens, I think most of the people will get problems with breathing, not only because of the methane, but also because the volume of oxygen becomes too low, because we don't have very much oxygen in the air that we breathe in. The highest volume in the air that we breathe in is nitrogen, which does not burn at all. You cannot put it on flames. So let's say many people use a lot of oxygen, let's say in the gym, and they're producing a lot of methane because they were eating something that they could not really completely use in their body. In those cases, I think people would run out because they would run out of oxygen before anything weird could happen. So I think the buildup of methane is just, it was never observed because people would just run out and were gasping for oxygen outside. But I mean, theoretically, if you would, let's say, I don't know, use all the methane from all those people and put it all into a certain box, the methane only, then probably you could start a nice little fire inside of that box.
There is a phenomenon called atmospheric decompression, which is a sudden escape of compressed air or gases. I think such an escape from a decomposing body which encounter a chemical reaction with normal atmospheric gases on the natural atmosphere could have caused the smoke witnessed coming from the grave. And that's from Lucky in Pretoria, speaking of Aisha Ranshod's message on Twitter. Would this be feasible, Doc?
I'm not sure. It depends if, let's say, the graveyard is very dusty, and then maybe some of the air that built a bubble under the whatever it is, soil or stone, comes out decompressed at a particular moment, and you observe it. Then probably some dust could be seen. And like I said, if you have an ignition source close by, then you could probably even see a little bit of a flame. So that is possible, but decompression is not necessary. It would be just enough to have like a pocket or a bubble of the decompositional gases, and they can always be set on fire. We know that because our technical staff at the Institute of Legal Medicine, where I did my PhD thesis, before I started to work there, they would show to students that the gases from a dead, decomposing, bloated corpse can be ignited, and they can burn by inserting making a little hole and then letting the gases get out of the body and then ignite the gases. But today we don't do that anymore because it's considered to be unethical to do something just to show that the gases are flammable, because that's obvious and you don't have to do that experiment anymore. But from that, we really know that any pocket of decompositional gas may be set on fire, decompressed or not decompressed. Yes, it's possible.
I am told that pain can be objectively observed through whatever scientific instruments we have in civilization, and it usually reads as heat. Is that true, Doc?
There's a very sophisticated scale concerning pain caused by heat, I have to say. So often it's already mixed together in the beginning, and that is quite interesting because the descriptions for that type of pain are sometimes very funny for us as scientists, because, for example, there's a certain type of heat that causes pain that is considered to be fruity. So if it's not very painful, then it's fruity, for example. That was interesting for me to read, and there are many descriptions relating to heat-related pain that can be found, for example, in the internet. So if some of the people who listen to the show want to Google that up, that's correct. But you can also have other types of pain. For example, clearly a very sharp cutting pain that could either be caused by heat, of course, like a flame directed towards your skin. That can be a very sharp pain, but of course it can also come from a sharp instrument like a knife or something like that. But I agree, it's a good remark. Indeed, many of the descriptions of pain may also be observed or felt caused by heat, or also eating very, very spicy food. That may also fall into the same category.
So my question is slightly different from the suggestion that says pain caused by heat. I'm sort of making the suggestion, carefully so, that pain is heat, not caused by. So I'm sort of pushing my luck here, Doc. I mean, here's a talk show host trying to sound like a scientist, but I'm suggesting the very remote possibility that pain is heat. and the more pain somebody starts to experience, perhaps the more heat. And that heat can be an ignition through a very unique composition or combination of certain chemicals and gases, hydrogen, oxygen, methane, and other, I suppose, substances, fat in the body that could, in a very unique moment, converge and create enough heat to spontaneously combust. Is that a possibility?
That is very beautiful, and that's a theory that nobody ever,
Really?
came up with. That's very, very beautiful, indeed. No,
We need to pay for that. Did you record that? It's my stuff. It's my stuff. All right, Chris, it's my stuff, brother.
if you want to, you can name the theory after yourself. So.
Pretty much some goes spontaneous human combustion theory, right?
Beautiful. I like that. No, but I have to be a little bit of a push down and disappoint you a little bit, because we know that even without any build-up of anything inside of your body, you can feel severe pain by just stimulating the nerves. So there's no heat involved, either a measurable heat after you gave the person the pain signal. So there's no heat building up. You can measure that with a thermometer or anything that records the temperature. And you can feel severe pain by just stimulating the nerve endings, so to speak, or inside of the body. You can stimulate any part of the body and no heat is produced. However, this is very difficult to prove or disprove in an experiment. So that's why it is so interesting, because many people, as soon as they, like you said, feel pain, they start to sweat, for example, or, the blood flow increases. And that, of course, will cause your body to release heat to the environment, because in many cases, the body temperature is higher than the temperature around. Not always. I mean, not in the desert at 50 degrees Celsius. Then, of course, your body heat is cooler than the desert heat. But in many cases, that's the case. So if you would, your theory would be very nice for to give it to students, because the students would really get problems how to distinguish between the heat that would be a build-up from the pain, like you were suggesting, compared to the heat that just comes from the blood flow and from the sweating and just from vegetative reactions of your body, but are not a real build-up of heat inside of your body. So we know from experiments that you may experience severe pain without any buildup of heat, but in reality, it often coincides. So it's a very nice thing. I will keep that in mind.
Yeah. The reason why I sort of put that quick theory together is because I speak a lot to physicians who talk about inflammation. And how that is very often read or understood as heating up. And in many cases, there is a build-up in temperature. And usually that is where we experience that build-up in temperature as pain, right? And that's why my idea was perhaps not a pain that is caused by heat, but heat itself being the pain.
Yes, okay, yeah. No, I hear. Oh, okay, I hear you. Yes.
Yeah.
Inflammation does cause temperature that is getting up a little bit. Everybody knows that from when you get a fever, then you measure the temperature and you know that you have a fever because the temperature is higher now. Yes. So inflammation will cause heat. Because the body will try to heat up your body, because many bacteria, for example, cannot survive the heat of, let's say, 42 degrees Celsius. So it kills many of the germs and of the mostly bacteria that are trying to infect you, the infectious agents. But the temperature will never get as high to a level up to or until which it may start to really ignite your body. And you can check that from both sides. So nobody ever in any hospital on planet Earth observed that an inflammation or a fever caused any burning of anything. And you need or you would need to observe such a burning to understand why people would ignite and burn, because they do burn and there are flames and there is charring and ashes and so on. So that's the one problem. And the other one is, if you put fire, like a little flame from a lighter or a match or a pipe or whatever, to a human body, then the body will not ignite at all, because in the beginning, the water inside of the body will evaporate a little bit and it will cause a little bit of a protective layer from humidity that became like a vapor, kind of a vapor, not a steam, but just a little bit of a protective vapor over your body. So that was never observed. But since I'm a scientist and I don't know everything, and no scientist knows everything, if anybody ever observes anything like that, so either with a little flame, you could ignite a piece of skin of a living person, or you observe somebody who has a severe fever and starts to burn. In those cases, please report that. Take a lot of pictures and a lot of temperature measurements and so on and so on. And then that would be something that, for example, we in our laboratory would love to look at.
So give me a call. I'd love to hear from you. What are your theories about the possibilities of spontaneous human combustion? Is it something that you can build up some sort of theory as to why it might be a reality, a truth? I'd be interested to hear from you on 011-883-0702. What is your scientific prognosis of this situation, Doc? What do you say is the explanation for the possible occurrence of spontaneous human combustion, or do you outright say, no, nonsense, there's no such?
Well, the image that you get, the literal image, even a photograph or a video image, or a cell phone image, is really stunning. It's really, really interesting to see that. Like I said in the beginning, the arms and legs are often there, the rest of the body and the head is consumed. And that is something that is probably going to continue to occur, not so much in the richer countries, because they have smoke detectors, so the smoke will be detected very, very early. For example, in Germany, you must have a smoke detector in your apartment. It is not allowed to live in an apartment without smoke detectors. So this will reduce the cases in richer countries. But the countries that are not as rich, they probably, have problems apart from smoke detectors that cost money and energy and so on. And so I think we will continue to see the image of a person in an apartment that is not burnt down, even on a mattress sometimes, that is not completely consumed by fire, and arms and legs remain to be seen. And it always, there are waves of interest in that matter. Even if you look into comedy series like South Park from the United States or other comedy series, every child did at one point hear about spontaneous human combustion, either as a joke or as something that is frightening, or as a horror story that other people experienced, and so on and so on. And in my lifetime, it came and went and came and went already 3 or 4 times, because sometimes during times when there's not much in the news, then journalists are just looking for something interesting. They stumble across the story, they look it up a little bit, and they just report the story, and then everybody has their opinion on that matter. And science is sometimes too boring, so it's much more exciting to tell the esoteric and fantastic story. So my prognosis is, A, people are going to continue to burn in unexpected situations, and B, the better story is the fantastic story, and the more boring story is the scientific test.
Doc, somebody reminds me that at some point you did say that you mentioned talking to a survivor of spontaneous human combustion. Tell us that story. Given what you've just said to me now, tell us about the story.
That was Adele Waldak in Belgium, Netherlands, and she came back from a walk with her dog and at the beach, and sat into the car of her family, of her kids, adult kids, and they were going home, and all of a sudden she started to burn. And it was clear from speaking to them, they never talked to the press, they were just frightened. So they didn't want that this is something that you can inherit to your kids or something like that. So they were really frightened, very friendly people. They had no obvious religious or esoteric or any other belief, not even a scientific belief. They had no beliefs at all. They were just like, please, we really want to understand what happened. So one thing is that happened during World War II. Some burnable substances out of bombs were thrown into that part of the ocean or the parts of the sea where she collected shells. So that was probably the source of ignition. But the question was, why did the source of ignition produce such a high temperature that she could really burn? And she had a very severe wound that had to be treated, and it was just by chance that she survived, because she fell out of the car because there was such a dense smoke in the car that nobody could breathe anymore, and she was burning, and the fire could not be it could not be handled at all. It didn't stop the fire. That was also interesting. So by sheer luck, there was a person who was a medically trained person, a medical helper in a house nearby, and he immediately called the rescue car and also helped Adele Waldak at that point. So she is the only person who ever survived. And what happened was that she put something in her pocket, one of these burnable bomb substances from World War II, that caused a flame that was very hot, probably like 1000 degrees Celsius. That liquefied the body fat at that part of her body, at the upper leg. And then that fat soaked into her clothing. And that produced the wick, and it did not stop burning because the substance that she collected was a substance that was designed to be unstoppable because it was like a war weapon. So that was a chain of lucky or unlucky events, but the most important part was that she was immediately checked in a hospital by a burns specialist, somebody who knows about people who have severe burns. That was good for us. So we talked to that person, also to Adele Waldak and everything, and he said, okay, that was an actual burn. It was a real flame. It was a real fire. It was real smoke. So this is not just an esoteric explanation for something else, like acid or anything like that. And from that, we started to reconstruct everything with experiments and look into all the other cases. But relating to your last question, the question before, the story still goes around. So if you go to the camp, there's a camping place at the beach. If you go there today, then people will still tell you the spooky story of the woman who ignited by fantastic forces. So even though we explained everything, even on television, locally, so that people know what happened, people were just not interested. They like the spooky story better.
So somebody is making a very interesting observation here, suggesting that most of the people who have spontaneous human combustion occur to them are usually lonely individuals. Is there, people who are alone or perhaps lonely, is there some sort of a connection that we can make to that emotional reality, and that that internal dispensation of loneliness and the possibility of SHC?
Oh, thank you very much to the person who mentioned that. That is very important. Yes, the people must be lonely because, like Adele Waldak, she survived because there were people around who could take care of this. But the wound would have been very severe, or she would have been breathing in the smoke, and then you get unconscious from the smoke, and then the fire continues, and then you cannot rescue yourself anymore and cannot ask for help. So yes, absolutely correct. When you look at the cases, the hundreds of cases that were reported properly in newspapers, medical journals, and so on, like I said, in the past 250 or 300 years, that is the one thing that in all of the cases must happen. You need to be alone, because if you're not alone, then in most cases, since the flames are very small, you may be rescued, because even if you have air, like the bad air, the smoky air, that non-oxygen containing air into your lungs, and you become unconscious. As soon as people stop the fire and bring you out in, let's say, into the fresh air, then you will awaken. And then in former times, probably people would die from an infection, secondary infection of the burn wound, but that would not happen anymore in modern times. So the modern cases that we see, as correctly stated by the person who asked you, were all lonely people. This must be the case for spontaneous human combustion to evolve or develop or bloom, so to speak. Yeah.
Dr. Mark Benecke, I want to thank you so much for your time. We have really learned from this conversation, and I really hope to speak to you again soon. Much appreciated.
It's a pleasure. And we also have a syndrome named after you, so that's also a good thing now.
Dr. Mark Benecke, a forensic biologist all the way from Germany, talking to us. Spontaneous human combustion. It's 10 o'clock time for Eyewitness News.
This is Eyewitness News.
Evening, everyone. Robin Adams here with your 10 p.m. news. We are going to start with the very latest out of Sudan, where intense fighting